Safety first this week. We're going to talk about slider stows. Hey, Brian, welcome back. Great to see you again.
Aloha, Dave.
Let's see, this week's Safety First, we want to talk a little bit about slider stows.
Yeah.
So there are a few different varieties. I know you're a big fan of slider stows.
I think that it's a good idea to get your slider down if you're qualified to do that.
So we have multiple different types. We've got first of all, the part where we actually kill the slider, right? Like we have a drawstring or maybe a piece of Velcro.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And then beyond
Velcro in a while.
Yeah, and then beyond that, we've got ways to keep the slider down at the bottom of the risers, and there's several different methods of that. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And maybe first start by telling us why it's important to stow your slider to begin with.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's disadvantages to stowing your slider, of course, right? So that you're task loaded already after opening, your heart rate is high, and now you got to deal with pulling this thing down. So it has to be justified in terms of the performance gains. Even though, of course, you're even losing visibility up and back somewhat. So why would you want to pull your slider down? When you think about the angle of your risers and the effect of the span of your risers, the tops of the risers in particular, and how that affects the shape of the wing. So from a frontal profile, your wing has an arc. All parachutes do have some degree of what we call anhedral arc, with the wingtips lower than the center. And that helps create stability. It makes it open better. If you go for a dihedral arc, your end cells will meet above your center cell. It's not something that we can do. However, if you can reduce that anhedral arc a little bit, flatten the wing somewhat, then the wing is actually producing more lift at the wingtips, right? So that lift vector is more in opposition to your weight, and you have a little more roll axis stability. And if you think about the projected area, right, so if there was a light above your wing, what is the size of the shadow? Same amount of square footage of the fabric. When the wing is flatter, now it actually has a larger projected area. So it's got more lift. It's got a better glide. It's got better ability to dig you out of a low turn if you've screwed up. So if you pull the slider all the way down to the risers and you couple that with loosening your chest strap to its fullest extent, what happens is, from a front profile, the wing gets flatter. The other thing that's, I think, very important for safety is that when you have your slider up at the top of the risers and your chest strap is tight, you have to think from the front view, it's a triangle, and you're hanging under that triangle. So when you bury a steering toggle, the yaw axis, when you think about it, the compass heading, the yaw is coming about with the canopy prior to you and somewhat separately from you. So you can induce line twist relatively easily. When you pull the slider all the way down, you loosen that chest strap, you're inside the triangle. You're part of the system. So you're much less likely to have the canopy turn. When I say turn, I mean yaw without you. Right? So if you're playing hard, it's a very, very nice thing. So there's a lot of advantages to pulling the slider down. But if you're in traffic after opening, your priority is to fly your parachute. So if you're still already task loaded with just dealing with the basic housekeeping stuff of unstowing your toggles and flying back to the drop zone, it's too soon to mess with your slider. So one step at a time. If your heart rate is still high, don't add more complexity to your skydive. So that being said, once the slider gets to the bottom of the risers down near the 3-ring, how do you keep it down? You don't want it to be riding back up, interfering with your access to the risers. So there's a few different options. One is the simplest method, I think, and quite frankly the safest, I believe, is to have some sort of a slider locking mechanism on the risers, typically on the front risers, some little piece of fabric that sticks out so that it actually is wider than the inner diameter of the grommet on your front riser on the slider. And so you pull the slider all the way down, and it locks down at the bottom of the risers. The other methods are something on your flap or on your jumpsuit, where you wrap that around and actually attach your slider to you. The disadvantage is, on some of those methods, if you have to cut away after you've stowed your slider, and of course we can talk about all the possibilities there, and why would that occur? It's not typical. But if it did occur, when you chop, you want to know that that thing's going to leave. Right? So if you just use the first method that I was discussing, the slider locks, or what I call slocks, I've got diagrams for a rudimentary one on my website for free. Just show it to your rigger. that way you haven't attached your slider to your body in any possible way. You haven't attached it to your rig. So you know it's going away when you chop.
The risers themselves are holding it down. The bottom of the riser is preventing it from going up.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a nice, elegant way to do it. I like it. I've moved to removable sliders, so I much prefer that now. But now, of course, you've got complexity with packing, and if you pack it up wrong, you've got a malfunction. So you have to take your time. It is a little bit slower in packing, but I love the visibility of my removable slider. Now, when we talk about the methods that actually allow you to anchor it down, the one I don't like is 2-inch wide Velcro, where you wrap that all up and around and stick it to the back of your jumpsuit or to the flap itself. Chances are, in a shear configuration as opposed to peel, right? So it shears the Velcro. It may actually stay on, and I know it's happened where somebody would chop and you're still trailing your main. So magnets, as far as I can tell, are a great answer to this. Not so good if you stow your credit cards in your reserve flap, but otherwise, this is a fairly effective tool for holding your slider down. And it's pretty easy. You are working behind your head as you do it, but you get used to it, right? I mean, you've got one of those, don't you?
I do. I love it.
Yeah, it works well. The visibility is still pretty good. Some people twist up their slider so that it sort of disappears almost completely. Do you do that at all, or you just
no? I pull it down and I put the magnetic flap over it, and I never see it. I mean, at that point, it's behind your head anyway.
Yeah. So it works quite well. But the part that I really want to urge people to think about is when you get open, your priority is to clear airspace. It's to fly your parachute. It's to stay present of what's going on around you. And then you deal with all these minor housekeeping things like pulling your slider down, unstowing your toggles, loosening your chest strap, putting on your makeup, loosening your booties.
But your feeling is that the magnetic slider stows are not an issue in a cutaway. You feel that that's going to release without a problem.
Yeah, it's sheer. It just slips right off. As far as I can tell, that's never going to cause a problem.
All right, very good, Brian. Appreciate you coming on again. And let's see, BigAirSportsWithAZ.com. What can we find there?
Well, you can find all kinds of good information, articles about how to fly your parachute better, all kinds of articles about how to deep breathe and calm yourself down when you're freaking out and having a bad time, how to convert a bad time into a good time.
All right. We're going to go check that out right now. BigAirSportsWithAZ.com.
Right on.